there, what's up? What's going on? Welcome into the show. My name is Chase Sr. Thanks for hanging out and watching this edition of Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. No matter where you are or how you're tuned in, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. Coming up here over the next several minutes, should Eagles fans be concerned about these four issues going into the 2025 campaign? I'm going to give you what I'm concerned about, then we're going to elaborate on that here on the program. First, let's begin with this. I just showed you a photo of some passionate Eagles fans from the early 2000s at Lincoln Financial Field. That era shaped my love of football and shaped my love for the Philadelphia Eagles. So if you love being an Eagles fan, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video right now. And while you do that, I want you to give me the year that you became an Eagles fan. For me, 1996, when I was only 4 years old. So should fans be concerned going into 2025 as the Eagles look to defend their Super Bowl championship? I have 4 questions and 4 topics that I want to touch on here. How will Philadelphia handle being the defending Super Bowl champions? The Eagles must replace a lot of snaps on defense for players who have departed this organization. The Eagles also lost some really important leaders. And how will new offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo step in for Kellen Moore? And let's begin with how the Eagles will handle being the hunted and not the hunter. Think back to 2023, after the Eagles had made it to the Super Bowl in 2022. Of course, they lost Super Bowl 57, but that gives us an example, and it gives the Eagles experience of how to handle a potential Super Bowl hangover. Can they learn from what transpired in 2023? When, during that season, the vibes were weird all year, the Eagles got off to a really good start, but they pulled out a lot of fluky dubs, so they weren't as good as what their record showed. The defense was horrific under Sean Desai, and then not any better under Matt Patricia. And then the offense under Brian Johnson was vanilla and predictable. The Super Bowl hangover, it was alive and well for Nick Sirianni and the Birds in 2023. And the collapse at the end of the year was as ugly as it could get. The Birds losing 6 of their last 7 games. And everything that could go wrong pretty much went wrong. And when the Eagles in the wild card round traveled down to Tampa to play the Buccaneers, things went from snowballing to an absolute avalanche. What an embarrassing display of football that was that night in prime time at Raymond James Stadium when the Eagles looked disinterested and it looked as though they didn't want to be on the field. They couldn't tackle. The effort was piss poor. They couldn't do anything well on either side of the ball. They couldn't even run a brotherly shove effectively as they got stopped on the goal line by Todd Bowles' defense. That 32-9 loss in the playoffs left a lot of people wondering, is the Super Bowl window closed? Should Nick Sirianni get fired? Now, to the Eagles' credit, the Eagles bounced back and they won the Super Bowl last year. And they came through with one of the most dominant, most impressive, one of the best wire-to-wire Super Bowl victories in the history of the National Football League. Among the 59 Super Bowls that have taken place, that Eagles victory over Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Steve Spagnuolo, and the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the best that you will ever witness. A pretty much flawless performance from Philadelphia. So to flush what happened in 2023 and to win the Super Bowl in 2024, it's something that we'll never forget. But remember, the Eagles were tested early in the 2024 campaign. Adversity had hit. Early in the year, things were not going great. Eagles started 2-2. They suffered another ugly loss against the Buccaneers in Week 4. They had the bye week in Week 5 to regroup. Then they came out of the bye. They played sloppy once again. Only beat the Browns 20-16 in a game that came down to the wire. And it's remembered from Nick Sirianni going up to some fans on the sideline saying, "We won. What do you have to say now? You were chirping me all game." I do think that experience at the start of last year and what happened in 2023 gives the Eagles perspective. gives the Eagles an example of how to deal with adversity and tough times. And I think the Eagles' experiences from 2022 and 2023 can help them here in 2025. But of course, it's a little bit of a concern. Here's what Nick Sirianni said on having sustained success. He said this offseason, I focused on that. What were the common denominators of different coaches that I talked to, or players that I spoke with, or Olympian Michael Johnson, other sports that we talked to? What were the common denominators of sustained success? Without getting into everything, I think there's two sides of it. The main thing is it takes what it takes, right? You're going to have to be able to work extremely hard, and you're going to have to be able to overcome adversity. You always have to be right in the moment of where you are. As I've done research and talked to these guys, and we've had an element of sustained success here as well, but you can have two ends of it. You rest on your laurels, you rest on your past accomplishments, and you're not here working or you're looking too far ahead of how we do this again. We're focused on our process and how we get better every single day. If your process is right, then it gives you the best chance to win. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win, but it gives you the best chance to win. Our goal is to just focus and to focus on where we are at this particular moment, to put the work in, to overcome the adversity, and the rest will take care of itself. Now, a good sign early in this offseason is that the Eagles aren't dealing with any drama. No contract holdouts, no contract beef, no contract standoffs. Every player on the 90-man roster was in attendance for Eagles mandatory minicamp. That is a good way to start the offseason. Number 2 on my concern list, the Eagles have to replace more than 4,000 snaps on defense from the 2024 campaign. Vic Fangio will be tested because there is a youth movement with this defense, and Vic Fangio is going to have to replace a lot of marquee players from the number 1 overall defense from last year that won the Super Bowl. Darius Slay is in Pittsburgh. Milton Williams is with the New England Patriots. C.J. Gardner-Johnson traded to the Houston Texans. Josh Sweat, Arizona Cardinals. Isaiah Rodgers, Minnesota Vikings. And all the players on that list, except for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, they got a much-deserved bag. Brandon Graham retired. Avonte Maddox went back to his home state of Michigan. He's with the Detroit Lions. Bryce Huff traded to the Niners. Oren Burks signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, of course, all of those players brought a different level of play and workload and snap counts to Philadelphia, but at some point or another, they were counted on or looked at as marquee contributors. And so this Eagles defense in 2025 is going to look a lot different. I have trust that Vic Fangio is going to be able to make it work because last year he comes in after the Eagles were one of the worst, maybe the worst defense in 2023, turned it around. And it took him about 4 or 5 weeks to do so. But coming out of the bye, from that point on, the Eagles really found their groove defensively. They were the number 1 defense in the National Football League. He did that in year 1. So Vic Fangio can do that going into year 2 with a couple of changes on that Eagles roster. It's one of the best defensive minds in the history of football. Before we continue to move forward on today's show, let me know, which team in the NFC stands in the Eagles' way of repeating as Super Bowl champions? Which team do you think is the biggest threat to Philadelphia in trying to make it back to the Super Bowl? We do have a great deal that we want to tell you about thanks to our friends at Fanatics. Don't these shirts look familiar? Don't they look fresh? Well, these are the shirts that the Eagles wore inside the Superdome, on the field in New Orleans after they won the Super Bowl, and in the locker room when they were celebrating hoisting that Lombardi trophy. They are on sale now, 50% off for only $20. This deal, limited time only. So all you have to do, it's very simple. Use that link down below, chatsports.com/SB shirt. You plug in that link. It takes you to Fanatics. You'll see the deal loud and clear right in front of you, 50% off. You use our link, and Fanatics will know that Chase Sr., Eagles Now, and Chat Sports sent you. Number 3, the Eagles lost last year some very valuable leaders. And part of the reason why the Eagles have been so successful under Nick Sirianni, they've had a great championship culture. Nick Sirianni and this Eagles organization, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, they value culture. Darius Slay was a part of that. He was a team captain. And last year, he played at a really high level coming off a 2023 season where he struggled and he was also injured. He was one of the more respected players inside that Eagles locker room. He crosses the state. He's with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers are raving about the leadership that Darius Slay, big play Slay, is bringing the Steelers. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I know that he's a little bit noisy. I know that he can be difficult to contain, but my gosh, the emotion that he played with, the fire that he took to the field with, the swagger, the confidence, the physicality, the versatility, the big play making, he was the heart and soul, the backbone of that Eagles back end. It's extremely risky that the Eagles traded him away. They saw what happened year over year from 2022 to 2023. Teams tried to bully the Eagles when C.J. Gardner-Johnson was on the team. They weren't having it. When he wasn't on the team, teams bullied Philadelphia. How do the Eagles respond? How do they deal with not having a player to the level of C.J. Gardner-Johnson on and off the field? Brandon Graham is one of the most iconic Eagles in the history of this organization. 15 years in the National Football League, consummate pro, another team captain, a guy who would be uplifting, positive, vivacious personality. He would make people smile and gravitate to him in that locker room. When you're around the Eagles as a team, you're always hearing that laugh. You're always sensing that smile. You're always feeling that presence of BG. Now, the Eagles last year, they moved on from Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey, who had a lot of the same intangibles of Brandon Graham. They won the Super Bowl. But Brandon Graham, not going to be easy to replace from a cultural standpoint, a leadership perspective, and last year he was playing at a very high level. And how about what Brooke Pryor tweeted out? She covers the Pittsburgh Steelers about Darius Slay. Darius Slay has gone to the Steelers organization that has had a good culture under Mike Tomlin. He's trying to add to that. Here's what Darius Slay, who was at Steelers OTA, said about the importance of organized team activities. Quote, "This is where you build. This is where it starts off. This is where championship football starts at. You want to be a champion? There's some stuff that you got to sacrifice." Slay brought that to the Eagles throughout his entire time with Philadelphia. And then lastly, Kevin Patullo, new Eagles offensive coordinator. When I interviewed him at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, I was impressed with the offensive mind. I was impressed with the offensive philosophy. We saw what happened, though, going from Shane Steichen to Brian Johnson. The Eagles offense did not adapt. The Eagles offense did not evolve. They did not make necessary changes. The league caught up. The Eagles offense in 2023 was predictable. They were vanilla. It was a very boring unit that wasn't explosive. They didn't surprise teams or catch teams off guard. It was a monotonous offensive season for the Eagles that year. Last year, Kellen Moore was looked at as a pass-happy merchant of a play caller. And then he sees this offensive line in Saquon Barkley, and the Eagles become an unstoppable running team. And Saquon Barkley had the best single season, regular season playoffs combined, for any running back in the history of the National Football League. That is the ability to adapt. But on top of that, I want to see Kevin Patullo bring some fresh, creative, modern-day ideas and concepts to this Eagles team. Because teams are going to try to catch up to Philadelphia. Now it's up to the Eagles to separate from teams trying to play catch-up. So to round things out, Jack, I want you to push up this graphic because I'm going to do a YouTube short on this, which you can also find here on the channel. Here are my 4 biggest concerns for the Philadelphia Eagles going into the 2025 season. How do the Eagles handle being the defending Super Bowl champions? It's a different position when you are the hunted and you're not the hunter. On defense, Vic Fangio is going to be tested. The Eagles have to replace more than 4,000 snaps lost on the defensive side of the ball, a unit that shut down and flustered Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and was the #1 overall defense in the National Football League. How does the Eagles' culture evolve? How do they handle losing a lot of leaders like Darius Slay, Brandon Graham, C.J. Gardner-Johnson? And lastly, Kevin Patullo steps in to some big shoes left by Kellen Moore. Does he bring fresh concepts, creative ideas? Does he adopt some modern day concepts to keep this offense changing and evolving so that other teams don't catch up to Philadelphia? All of the talent is there, and what a great career opportunity this is for Kevin Patullo. Are you going to take advantage of it, or are you going to flop like Brian Johnson did in 2023? If you enjoyed today's Philadelphia Eagles Now, real one, roll call. Give me a real one down in the comments section. We appreciate your support as always, and don't forget to subscribe.